Following the Great Sith War, the galaxy and Jedi Order itself would enter a period of great reckoning. Though the Sith were believed to be purged, the problem remained that Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun, two great servants of darkness, had come from within the Jedi Order. Thus began the tumultuous time of what we know as the Old Republic, where Star Wars legends of a bygone age rose and fell. This is the first video I will make covering this time period, and will be slightly different from my other Star Wars videos. There is no decisive one series of books or comics for the Old Republic, so I have had to research these events using different types of sources, ranging from comic series to the iconic Knights of the Old Republic and Star Wars, the Old Republic video games. The book Revan, for instance, has many expositional flashbacks that fill in gaps of Old Republic history, in the Mandalorian Wars, and the origins of Vitiate's Sith Empire. I will cover all these events in chronological order, so these videos on the Old Republic may jump around between sources from time to time. It can be, and certainly was, very confusing to try and piece everything together, so I will put all the sources used in the description of each video below. Let's dive in. Long ago, the Sith Empire was defeated by the Republic in the Great Hyperspace War. After Naga Sadow fled to Yavin 4, the Republic decided to cleanse the galaxy of the presence of the Sith people. The worlds of the Sith, including Korriban itself, were attacked, and many of the Sith species were killed. But some fled into the deep reaches of the galaxy, and the Jedi came to believe the Sith species had gone extinct. Later Dark Lords such as Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun were not true Sith, but fallen Jedi, and their power paled in comparison to perhaps the most powerful Sith in the history of the galaxy, Vitiate, the Sith Emperor. The Emperor himself was born nearly 1,000 years before the redemption of Revan on the world of Madrias. His birth name was Tenebrae, and it was said he was born with eyes black like the void of space, and he possessed a supernatural aura to his voice and general presence. He began to show signs of force sensitivity at the age of 6. However, his parents were not strong in the force, and his mother confessed to having an affair with a local Sith Lord. His father lashed out at her, and Tenebrae instantly snapped his neck with a mere thought. He then tortured his mother for months for her betrayal of the family. Tenebrae continued to assert his dominance over his village, and slowly his influence spread in a reign of terror, with legions of soldiers coming to stand by him. Thousands died in his rise, and he seemed to feed off the pain of his foes' suffering. None had the power to resist him. The reigning Sith Lord of Madrias, far away in distant lands at the time, was Lord Dramath. He initially disregarded the stories, not even realizing he was Tenebrae's father. Thus it was after 4 long years he finally decided to see the upstart village leader. Tenebrae was only 10 when he first met his father, but such was his might he stripped Dramath completely of his mind and powers. Dramath's other son fled, and within 3 years Tenebrae had conquered Madrias, sweeping aside any Sith who opposed him. At the age of 13, he met Marco Ragnos, Lord of all the Sith in existence, and was crowned Lord Vitiate. He researched the Force for some 100 years after on Madrias. Vitiate did not partake in the power struggles that erupted after the death of Marco Ragnos, nor did he partake in the Great Hyperspace War with Naga Sadow or the Sith War with Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun. Long he watched in silence, until after the decimation of the Sith in the Sith War, he summoned the remaining Sith Lords to Madrias. Lured by the promises of great power and driven by fear of the Jedi, many answered to Vitiate, who at the time was still an unassuming lord. But the Sith on Madrias were immediately subjugated to Vitiate's will, and he dominated their minds and forced them to participate in a vastly complex ritual. He utterly consumed and devoured their power, obliterating them into nothingness. This storm spread to the entirety of Madrias, consuming every living being on the planet. Millions died, transforming Madrias into the world of Nathema and into a lifeless husk. Vitiate, now the Emperor, had been granted immortality. He rallied the rest of the Sith under his control and led them on a small fleet into the deep reaches of space. Before that apocalypse, however, Vitiate had been copiously researching the location of Dromund Kaas, the ancient homeworld of the Sith species. Upon the annihilation of Madrias, he became the only person in the galaxy with knowledge of that information. The Sith Emperor then rallied a panicked and fearful people, proclaiming he would lead them to salvation. Jumping into hyperspace, they wandered space for 20 years, with Admiral Odile Viken rising in prominence and forming the foundations of the Imperial military. This was planned by the Emperor, who slowly built up his reputation as a god and savior as his people turned to him ever more for guidance. Eventually, the Sith exiles came to the world of Dromund Kaas, and the Emperor began to establish a new civilization, far hidden from the eyes of the Republic and the Jedi. A new empire was established with eyes for vengeance against the Republic. The Emperor himself withdrew and left ruling matters to his Dark Council, which included Viken. Viken reformed the military, creating a well-trained machine whose regimen and structure lasted for thousands of years. The Emperor became apotheosized, his feats deemed legendary. The entire world of Dromund Kaas revered him, and there was utterly no one on the planet who could hope to contest his power. Over time, Dromund Kaas was entirely conquered by the Empire, and Viken then began the construction of a massive armada, which was planned to take centuries. He was promoted to the rank of Grand Moff, but was killed in a military campaign in an alien system, one of the early prototypes for a Star Destroyer. But his vision endured, and for long centuries after his death, the Sith Empire would grow in might. During this time, the Sith Emperor began to develop an extreme fear of death. For 1,000 years he had ruled his empire, with unlimited power nearly in his grasp. The thought of losing it all upon death maddened him, and the only way to possibly eliminate all threats to him was to annihilate the entire galaxy. And in the dark, hidden from the Republic and Jedi, he waited and he planned. During the Great Sith War, Mandalore the Indomitable, leader of the Mandalorian clans and commander of Ulic Qel-Droma, was killed on Duxon. His mask, and thus mantle of leadership, was found and claimed by another Mandalorian, who adopted the title Mandalore the Ultimate. He began to rebuild the clans, taking into his service the scientist Antos Wyrick, or better known as Demagol, and his top commander Cassius Fett. As the strength of the Mandalorians slowly recovered, they lived as nomads but were eventually gathered into a massive army by Mandalore the Ultimate. The new warriors were called Neo-Crusaders. During this time, the Republic was also rebuilding following the defeat of Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma. Many new hyperspace routes were charted, and more worlds, including one called Terrace, were brought into the Republic. All the while, the Sith Empire continued to grow in the shadows, and now saw an opportunity to test the Republic and gauge its strength. A Sith intelligence operative, posing as an emissary, was sent to Mandalore the Ultimate. The operative took Mandalore to the tomb of Dramath II, an ancient Sith Lord and son of Lord Dramath. He manipulated the leader of the Mandalorians, claiming his master had had a vision of a great conquest, a glorious victory for the Mandalorians. It was a ploy by the Sith to assess the Republic's defenses, and it worked like a charm. Mandalore the Ultimate fell under the influence of the Sith, and came to believe the Republic was vulnerable for attack. His Neo-Crusaders first struck at worlds weakened during the Sith War, gaining momentum until Mandalore the Ultimate deemed the time right to attack the heart of the Republic. For Mandalore the Ultimate then introduced a revolutionary concept. No longer would the Crusaders be composed of exclusively Tongs, but now any aliens who proved their worth could become full members of the Mandalorian clans. Under this guiding principle, the ranks of the Mandalorians swelled, and under the new Mandalorians' leadership, they became a force of conquerors, not pillagers. They began striking at the Outer Rim worlds, taking the vital shipyard worlds like Althir III, and established a stronghold at Duxon. The Republic mobilized its forces and set up a defensive line near the planet of Terrace. The Mandalorians continued to harass the Republic, but seemed content to hang back for the time being. War has struck the galaxy once more. The Mandalorians have begun a series of raids on the outer edges of the galaxy, provoking the Republic into open conflict. On the planet of Terrace, a lowly spice trader named Marn Hieroglyph heads to his hideout, only to find it has been broken into by the Jedi Padawan Zayne Carrick. Zayne chases Marn and tries to arrest him, but is kicked in the face and plummets off a building. It is another failure for Zayne, who unfortunately is one of the clumsiest Padawans in his class, and is not as strong in the Force as others. He falls and crashes through a window, where he is confronted by his master, Lucian Dre. Lucian and the other masters are hosting a banquet, celebrating the soon-to-be knighting of several Padawans, including Zayne's friend Shad. Zayne himself will not be knighted, though 4 of his friends will be promoted and presumably sent to the front lines of the raging Mandalorian War. Off to the side, however, the masters of all the Padawans seem to be plotting something, and soon dismiss the Padawans until the knighting ceremony later that evening. Zayne is told to stay behind and compensate the manager for the damage he caused, but he soon sees Griff again on the streets below. Even though the ceremony is in less than an hour, he leaps out and chases Griff. He manages to capture him and flies away in a speeder, heading towards the Jedi Temple to take Griff to the Masters. Zayne rushes in alone, preparing to ask the Masters for forgiveness. What he sees, however, rocks his world. The Masters have their lightsabers drawn and are standing over the dead bodies of Zayne's friends. They have killed their own Padawans in cold blood. Lucian stares at Zayne, and the young Jedi turns and flees. The Masters chase after Zayne, and Lucian asks him to stop delaying the inevitable. In response, Zayne ignites his lightsaber and jumps down an elevator shaft. He cuts his way out through a warehouse and manages to make it outside and run to his speeder with Griff still in it. The way out is shut, but Zayne then takes his speeder and shoots back up the hole he made in the elevator. The Masters continue the pursuit, and Zayne and Griff crash through a lecture hall. They hide in a cafeteria garbage chute as Master Rana Tay grills the students, but the chute is activated and they plummet down into the lower city. Zayne is still shocked, wanting to know why the Masters would have killed his friends. Then, he and Griff see a large holo displaying Zayne as wanted. The Jedi, as well as civil authorities, are now hunting them both down. Zayne and Griff head to a seedy bar, and Zayne decides to follow his past, to retrace his upbringing as a Jedi to understand why the Masters did what they did. They move to head to the Undercity, but elsewhere, the Masters are meditating and through the Force catch a glimpse of Zayne and Griff's plan. Zayne and Griff catch a ride from a Wookiee, but get off at the wrong stop and are cornered by thugs wanting to claim their bounties. Griff, however, talks them down and convinces them the Wookiee is a spice smuggler. With this diversion, he and Zayne head to their actual destination, for it is revealed that Griff created a false trail to the gate of the Undercity of Terrace. He says it is too dangerous to actually venture in, and it turns out the Masters actually fell for the bait. They are in the Undercity fighting off countless rock ghouls, but receive news of a fresh sighting from the city constable and plan to head back up. Zayne and Griff arrive at the junction to await their ride off-world. To keep his identity a secret, Zayne is forced to cut off his Padawan braid. Then, debris falls towards them, nearly crushing Griff. A woman shows up and beats Zayne with an electrostaff, telling them both to leave. Her name is Jerael, and Griff asks her to take them to a man named Camper. She tells them in the wake of the crisis, many businesses have decided to leave Terrace, crippling the lower classes. Camper, a rambling old man, then shows up. Griff unsuccessfully tries to convince him to let the fugitives escape on their ship, when all of a sudden the Constable of Terrace shows up. Now left with no other option, Jerael and Camper flee into their shelter as the Jedi Masters drop down. It turns out their hideaway is actually a junk hauler, and they are able to make it into space. However, when they reach orbit, the rundown ship, called the Last Resort, loses power. Camper, however, fiddles with some circuits and they shoot forward into an asteroid field. The Constable pulls back, and for now, the 4 unexpected travel companions are safe. Later that evening, Zayne decides to try and contact Master Vandar Tok'er, a member of the Dantooine Jedi Council and a former master of his. Master Vandar, however, is skeptical of his story and wonders if the dark side has somehow clouded Zayne's memory, especially given his only marginal force powers. He suggests Zayne surrender himself to the Masters, where a Jedi Consular will be able to probe his mind. Then Zayne is hit in the back of the head by Jerael, ending the transmission. It turns out he had to navigate the ship into open space to send the signal, and now the Masters are back on their trail. Zayne then realizes that all the Terrace Masters except for Lucian are Consulars, specialized Jedi who are seers, researchers, and healers. He decides to head to the Rogue Moon, where the Padawan's last mission was before the killings. Zayne and Jerael touch down on the moon, which is constantly subjected to micro-bombardments of small asteroids. Jerael learns their last mission was to make it across a valley blindfolded. After dodging a small meteor, Zayne suddenly remembers the Masters had brought along a droid called LB. He believes the droid may have seen what spooked the Masters in the time it took for the Padawans to cross the valley. For after returning to Terrace, the Masters had spent several days in the temple before emerging and announcing the commencement of the Nightings. Zayne and Jerael search below a cliff and manage to actually find the remains of LB, but then the Masters arrive, dropping down with their lightsabers ignited. Lucian walks forward towards Zayne, accompanied by the Constable of Terrace. Zayne and Jerael huddle near the cliffside, and then the Last Resort arrives and opens fire on the police ship. They manage to escape and hide once more in the asteroid belt, and Zayne asks Camper if he can fix the wrecked LB. The droid is brought back to life, and shows them all a recording of his last moments. They see 4 of the Masters meditating in a circle, with Lucian standing to the side. It is revealed the 4 Jedi saw terrible visions of their deaths and the galaxy in flames, with the Mandalorians attacking and somehow, inexplicably, the return of the Sith. A Dark Lord appeared on Terrace, and it was wearing the same red armor as the Padawans were on the Rogue Moon. The Masters became convinced their Padawans must die, believing they were acting for the good of the galaxy. Zayne now knows they are driven by a fear that the Republic and Jedi Order itself will fall. Then, a tractor beam hits their ship. Griff recognizes the ship as belonging to the pirate Valius Ying. They are hunting the bounty on Griff and Zayne, but Griff is able to reach a deal. He sells them his warehouses on Terrace in exchange for his freedom, and Camper and Jerael will be released as they are not part of the bounty. But Zayne will be brought back to Terrace and Master Lucian Dre. Zayne is handed over, but later he manages to knock out his guards. He sneaks over to the Last Resort and plans to steal it, believing he must now vanish and disappear into the galaxy. However, Jerael discovers him, understandably furious that he will abandon her and Camper after uprooting their lives on Terrace. She reveals she has sworn to protect Camper in exchange for him taking her in years ago. Zayne is moved and drops his lightsaber, planning now to turn himself in and prevent the prophecy of the Masters from being fulfilled. Zayne surrenders to the civil authorities, and news of his capture rocks Terrace. Confidence in the Jedi has already been waning on the planet, which is close to the front lines of the Mandalorian War. Zayne is brought before the Masters, where Lucian openly admits the Masters were responsible for the killings. It is revealed the 5 Masters are part of a Jedi Covenant, established to ensure another conflict like the Sith War does not fall upon the Republic. Lucian kills Captain Ying and moves in to finish off Zayne. Then, an explosion rocks the building. An armored figure with a golden lightsaber drops in, swinging wildly. It turns out to be Jerael, and she flies away with Zayne, who escapes the Masters again. She, Griff, and Camper had all returned on the last resort to rescue Zayne, and now they fly away to space. Weeks pass, and riots soon begin to break out on Taris. Lucian and the other Masters are recalled to Coruscant, which they know leave the planet to the mercy of the Mandalorians. They then receive a transmission from Zayne himself. He tells them he is on a mission of justice, and has had a vision that one day one of them will confess and clear his name. Zayne vows to hunt them all down until one of them fulfills the vision. The others will be subjected to death. On the mining colony of Venquo, a security team lounges around on the fringes of Republic space. One of them catches a refugee sneaking around the camp, presumably trying to steal supplies. The refugee appeals to the camp leader for aid, and then a transmission from Jedi Master Cornelia arrives, warning of an impending Mandalorian attack. Initially, the soldiers are hesitant to believe the recording, as it wasn't over the official Republic channel. But in the shadows, the refugee uses the Force to manipulate their minds and convince them the warning is real. Loud booms then rattle the camp, and the panicked soldiers quickly take to the skies, leaving the refugee behind. It is then revealed the refugee was Zayne, and it was all a ploy to get the camp deserted so that he, Griff, Jerael, and Camper could loot its supplies. However, by sheer bad luck, the Mandalorians actually do attack the colony, and they are all forced to find cover as a battle breaks out. Commandos quickly surround Jerael, who is holding Zayne's lightsaber. They mistake her for a Jedi and take her captive. Zayne, Griff, Camper, and Elby manage to fight their way back to the last resort. Then, a Mandalorian commander named Roland flies out of the woods at Zayne, knocking him down. Roland then spares Zayne, instead moving to steal their ship. It is revealed that Mandalore the Ultimate had ordered the attack on Venquo to divert the Republic's attention, clearing the way for the true target of Taris. Meanwhile, Griff, Zayne, and Elby barely manage to make it on to the last resort before it takes off. They fight the Mandalorian, and Elby pins him down. And elsewhere, the Republic fleet arrives to respond to the Mandalorian attack. Led by Captain Carrick, they notice a Mandalorian ship flying away from Venquo, but decide to let it go. Carrick knows this attack signifies the real beginning of the war, as previously the Mandalorians had kept to lightly defended rim worlds. Then, his ship sees the last resort also flying away, presumably with the traitorous Jedi Zayne Carrick. The ship jumps towards Mandalorian space, leading Carrick to believe Zayne was a Mandalorian agent all along. On the last resort, Zayne learns that Camper tracked the ship with Jerael to Mandalorian space and jumped after it. The captive Roland then reveals that they are likely headed to Flashpoint, a remote outpost close to a star. It is commanded by the top Mandalorian scientist Demagal, who studies Jedi to understand their powers. The Mandalorian tells them his name is Roland Dyer, a combat veteran who has deserted the main campaign. He confides he does not fully understand the reasons behind the war, and also tells Zayne the Jedi have abandoned Taris. Meanwhile, Jerael is thrown into Flashpoint. Despite her plea, she isn't actually a Jedi. She briefly talks with another captive Jedi named Squint, but then Demagal himself walks out. The scientist looks to examine Jerael, the fresh arrival, but Squint volunteers instead to take her place. Elsewhere on Coruscant, Lucian, Dre, and the other Masters visit the Dre estate, only to find it closed off to them. They have been told there are not enough resources available to capture Zayne, and a droid also walks out and informs them Lucian's mother will eventually contact them. Later, Lucian appears before the Jedi High Council, where he admits to killing the Padawans on Taris. His appeals for the Jedi to focus on the re-emergence of the Sith are ignored, and they are all split up for separate assignments. Master Rana Tay is furious, and Lucian decides their covenant will continue to hunt Zayne. He returns to the estate, and encounters his family aide Hazen. He is scolded for not bringing the terrorist Padawans to Coruscant to be evaluated. Lucien recalls how 30 long years ago, a man named Hazen approached his mother with a young Jedi for her to mentor, who turns out to be Cornelia. 5 years passed, and Lucien was not allowed to train with her and the other students, as he lacked an affinity for Jedi seer powers and his strengths laid more in combat as a warrior. Later, it is revealed his mother Crinda Dre had recruited the other 4 students to form a group of powerful seers, a covenant designed to prevent the return of the Sith at any and all costs. She asks Hazen for aid, and the Dre estate's resources will be used to help the seers. Lucien will serve as their martial protector. Back on Flashpoint, the Last Resort is able to infiltrate the station using Rolan as cover. They present Zayne as a captive Jedi and hand him over to Dimagal. He is immediately recognized by Jarail and Squint as well, but is taken to be studied by Dimagal. Dimagal is unaffected by forced persuasion, but then Rolan strikes and knocks the scientist out. They take his armor and leave the lab. Jarail confronts Zayne, who is wearing Dimagal's armor, and attacks him. He speaks to her through the Force and she reels away. Zayne and Rolan continue outside their ship, where they have hung a small bag of explosives. As they distract the sentries, Zayne uses the Force to scatter the explosives across the station. Then, Griff hails the station posing as a Republic commander and detonates the bombs. Explosions rip through the compound, bringing down its shields and threatening to expose everyone to the sun close by. The panicked Mandalorians flee the station, and Rolan and Zayne rush back in to evacuate the Jedi. The Jedi Squint thanks Zayne as Rolan agrees to escort Dimagal back to Coruscant. Squint reveals his master is currently investigating a vision on Duxon, and asks Zayne if he'd be willing to join their movement to end the Mandalorian War. Zayne respectfully declines, and Squint walks away towards the shuttle, telling Jarail to call him Alec should they ever meet again. Jarail and Camper are posing as social elites on a distant banking planet. They meet a banker named Arvon, claiming they want to unfreeze one of their accounts on Terrace. Zayne and Griff eavesdrop on the conversation from their ship, and listen as they are able to gain access to Griff's funds from his life of crime. However, Camper and Jarail are being watched by 2 bounty hunters, who leap out of the bushes and attack them and Arvon. They abduct the banker and flee, and Zayne and Griff begin to pursue them. Griff tells Zayne they are the Ithorian Mumo brothers. Zayne catches up to the brother with Arvon, and realizes the banker is actually his father. Nonetheless, the brothers evade Zayne and make it back to their ship, where it is revealed they were hired by Jedi Master Rana Tay. She is furious at them for complicating the plan, as they were only supposed to watch Arvon and not kidnap him. The brothers begin to bicker and brawl. One is knocked out and the other heads to a nearby bar, leaving Arvon on their ship. Griff tracks him down, and is able to trick the dim-witted bounty hunter into telling him where their ship is. Zayne follows him and learns of Rana Tay's involvement. He breaks in and frees his father, who tells Zayne his parents never believed he was responsible for the Padawan massacres. Zayne and Arvon make it back to the Last Resort, where Griff is able to be cashed out. To protect his family, Zayne transfers his cut of the funds to Master Vandar Tokair, where his father will have a new job and be safeguarded by the Jedi on Dantooine. Later, the companions fly to Raltir, but are tracked by E.G. Vam, who is under the service of Lord Adaska. Zayne is given Vam braces by Camper, gauntlets which are resistant to blows from lightsabers. The 4 friends prepare to split up, as it makes little sense for everyone to keep hiding together in the same place. Jarail and Camper leave the planet, and Zayne stays behind with Griff. Griff sees an upcoming opportunity to make money, as Raltir is becoming a new front in the Mandalorian War. He proposes they hire some security and move closer to the front, claiming to have already acquired a ship. Meanwhile, Camper and Jarail see the Republic Navy amassing above Raltir as they jump to hyperspace, while a cargo box begins to glow red. It is revealed that Griff has hired someone to steal a ship for them, via a Trandoshan named Slisk. Zayne and Griff trick Slisk into being seemingly saved by Griff when a pillar nearly crushes him, and the Trandoshan pledges his life in servitude to Griff. They jump to orbit as the owners of the ship attack them, but run into the military convoy. Their ship is hailed as it turns out their ship is a mess hall for the army. Back on the last resort, an assassin droid emerges from the cargo hold and attacks Camper, knocking him out. However, LB, Jarail, and surprisingly Roland are able to destroy the droid. Zayne and Griff's ship, the Little Bivoli, becomes entrenched in the military and gains a reputation as one of the best mess hall ships. Zayne meets Karath, now an admiral, and Lieutenant Cartho Nasi, and begins to feel sympathy for the displaced native Stereb. He also learns the Mandalorians are expected to attack tomorrow. Griff is hesitant to leave, as their ship is making a considerable amount of money. Zayne is frustrated, but then has a vision of Mandalore ordering a bombardment of the Republic ground forces and obliterating the Stereb cities. Griff agrees to leave the planet, and Zayne decides to try and warn Admiral Kara, knowing he is still a fugitive of the Republic. Griff, however, ends up delaying the departure to squeeze in one last breakfast rush as Zayne sneaks onto Cartho Nasi's ship. He is brought to Admiral Kara, who looks down on him with disdain and regards Zayne as a Jedi killer. Karath also believes Zayne to be a Mandalorian spy and orders him to be arrested. Then, the Mandalorians arrive to attack Sirocco, with Griff and Slisk still on the surface. Zayne frantically tries to warn Kara to move his soldiers away from the cities, but his pleas fall on deaf ears. A barrage of nuclear missiles is launched, but instead of hitting the Republic fleet, the Mandalorians weave them around the defenders and strike at the cities. Countless lives are lost, and the effects are felt across the galaxy by the Jedi, including the Terrorist Masters and Malak and his own master. Zayne is crushed, believing Griff to be dead. However, Cartho Nasi reveals that he called 17 cities and was able to alert them to go underground, hopefully before the missiles impact. Meanwhile, Jarail and Camper have traveled to the bioengineering world of Arcania, ruled by Lord Adaska. Camper's health has worsened after the assassination attempt, and they have traveled to Arcania only as a last resort. Jarail reveals to Roland that Ada's corpse has been hunting Camper for decades, though she does not know why. On the surface, she meets a native with the same pale white skin color as her, and learns they are called offshoots and regarded as different from pure-blood humans. Her guide, Zadawi, is angry at how Ada's corpse refuses to help the offshoots and how they are treated as second-class citizens. Jarail sneaks into the main city to try and get genetic readings from Camper's blood, but is quickly discovered and captured. The Arcanians then send a ship to confront the last resort, where Camper and Roland have stayed on board. Lord Adaska shows them a captive Jarail, and Camper agrees to be taken on to the Arcanian legacy. There, Adaska reveals to Jarail that Camper used to work for Ada's Corp years ago. The Arcanian legacy is a state-of-the-art medical research center, and Camper used to be one of its brightest students. However, he became exposed to Balanquar's virus, which initially appears harmless but surfaces in offshoots when they hit old age. Meanwhile, Admiral Kara's fleet is under heavy attack above Sirocco. Karath and Onasi free Zayne and ask him to help with their escape from the Mandalorians. They find a way to the cargo bay and Onasi's ship. Elsewhere, Adaska begins to question Roland, who learns his recent adventures have made him a cult hero of sorts on Mandalore. It is revealed then that Adaska lied to Jarail about the virus. Camper has been cured, but his sickness was due to allergens accumulated in the last resort while on Terrace. Now, he and Jarail are needed by Adaska for a secret project. On Teleroth, the banking world has fallen into chaos with the defeat of Kara's fleet. Master Lucian Dre is on the surface, and privately calls Hazen to discuss the recent developments. He learns Hazen has been working with Watch Circle Vodo, and has received a warning of a destructive evil arising, though it does not seem to be Sith in nature. Hazen wonders if it could be used to serve the Covenant, and tells Lucian that Lord Adaska is connected to everything, and also contacted the Jedi Revanchist leader at some point. Lucian is ordered to investigate this evil and report back. Adaska visits Camper and tells him he must fulfill his contract to the firm, while Roland explores the medical labs on the ship. Adaska then hails a Nazi ship, telling him and Karath he may have something that will allow the Republic to win the war. At a dinner with Jerael, he then tells her unique genetics may allow for the true Arcanian race to be restored. Jerael is shown a hologram of an Exogor, a massive self-sustaining organism that lives in open space and floats across the galaxy. Long ago, an Adas Corp scientist named Gorman Vandrake was able to enter the brain cavity of an Exogorth and learn they travel between stars looking for essential minerals to survive. Adaska then tells Jerael that they tracked a large group of Exogorths to a dying medium-sized star, where dozens of them fell into hibernation after gorging themselves. It is revealed that Gorman Vandrake is Camper, and his research was focused on how to control the Exogorths and how to accelerate their growth and dictate where they travel. Admiral Kara's ship travels to Omanoth to observe the Exogorths and meet with Lord Adaska. Jerael and Zayne are reunited, and she kisses Zayne before warning him subtly of Camper's imprisonment and Adaska's plan. Zayne is detained, and just then the Jedi Alec arrives, representing the Revanchists. He and Jerael then reunite with Roland as Lucian Dre shows up. However, Adaska spikes Dre's wine, as the Jedi disagrees with the weaponization of the Exogorths. He returns to the Republic contingent, where Admiral Kara tries to convince Adaska to let the Republic military have the slugs. Alec proposes the Revanchists instead be given the weapon, confiding to Jerael that the Jedi have foreseen years of chaos in the future. It is then revealed that the Mandalorians themselves have arrived to discuss a potential deal, with Mandalore himself hailing Adaska. Adaska knows his corporation is in a position of great power and looks to leverage his growing influence. Meanwhile, Lucian Dre wakes up from a stupor to find he has been tied back to back with none other than Zayne. Back on the main bridge, Alec leaps forward to attack Mandalore, but is pushed back by Karath and Adaska. They all stand by as Adaska prepares for a test run of the slugs, and Roland is sent to speak with Mandalore, as he is technically still a deserter. Roland is now known as the Questioner, and learns from Mandalore his reputation has grown into something that reinforces the importance of obeying the word of Mandalore. The war has moved rapidly for the Mandalorians, causing their numbers to swell and logistical problems to arise. To maintain some cohesion, Mandalore's vanguard is now composed entirely of Neo-Crusaders. He gives Roland a new set of armor, saying he is believed to be dead and it is important it stays that way. Then, Jerael gets a secret message from Camper, asking to talk. She sneaks away as Adaska's head scientist arrives with news of Jerael's blood sample. Camper reveals the diseases plaguing the offshoot habitations were actually released by Adas Corp to drive them away just as Adaska attacks Jerael. Alec intervenes as Adaska commands Camper to carry through with the test. Elsewhere, Zayne and Lucian have a fiery reunion, where Zayne learns Adaska was financially connected to the Dre estate. Lucian accuses him of having fallen to anger, a path that inevitably leads to the dark side. The two Jedi then destroy the sentry droids guarding them, but then Lucian finds his lightsaber and immediately strikes at Zayne. But Zayne blocks the blow with his gauntlets from Camper. Zayne asserts he is no longer afraid of the Masters, and the two put aside their feud temporarily to deal with Adaska. The feeding test is well underway, and Cartho Nasi slips away back to his ship. Karath and Mandalore jockey for Adaska's favor. The Admiral offers a Senate seat, but Mandalore proposes that Adaska become the weaponsmith to all Mandalorian clans. Elsewhere, a shadowy figure guns down two scientists in a medical lab who are studying Jerael's blood. Cartho Nasi then runs into Zayne and Lucian and gives Zayne back his lightsaber. Roland shows up as well, and he and Zayne convince Lucian and Cal that they must rescue Jerael. So as the debate between the factions in Adaska's chamber rages on, Zayne dons Roland's armor and strides in with Cal. They begin to fight, and then Zayne takes off his helmet as Lucian drops in. They address Adaska, claiming to be his agents, and chaos erupts with the Mandalorians furious. Jerael is freed, and elsewhere, Camper commandeers the last resort back from Arcanian scientists. The situation worsens for Adaska, as Mandalore retreats back to his shuttles and the Exogors begin attacking Arcanian fighters. 3 of the monsters crash into Adaska's observatory dome, and the Republic pulls out. Cartho Nasi lets Zayne escape, as Jarael and Roland contact Camper on the last resort. To save everyone, Camper plans to lead the slugs out into open space and jump to hyperspace. He will then remove their hyperdrives, but will leave behind Jarael and Elby. Roland swears to protect Jarael as Camper signs on. Then, another ship crashes in. One of the Mumo brothers emerges, accompanied by Slisk. They have been sent by Griff, who is apparently part of a resistance movement on Terrace. Zayne flees with them, back to where it all began. They reach a war-torn Terrace, where the Mandalorians, led by Cassus Fett, are engaged in vicious street fighting with the rebels. Zayne is mistaken for a Mandalorian due to his armor, but he is able to find Griff's hideout. He meets another fighter named Gadon, and tries to heal their wounded. Gadon tells him their group is trying to link up with the main resistance, and believes that handing over Zayne may be the key. Later, Griff tells him he was sent to Terrace by a figure named Jervo Thalion, head of Losan Industries. His mission was to find Senator Goravus, the head of the resistance. Thalion and Goravus are friends and political allies, and in exchange for his service, the charges against Griff and Zayne will be dropped. A young Twi'lek named Mission then approaches Zayne, claiming to have a secret. They follow her brother to a large silo, where along with Gadon and Griff they discover kidnapped children of the Constable of Terrace. Left with no other option, they decide to meet with the main resistance to parley. At the meeting, Zayne is stunned to see Shell, the sister of one of the Padawans. He rushes towards her, but she still believes he killed her brother, and pulls a blaster on him. Then, Master Rana Te appears behind her, urging Shell to finish Zayne off. She then sees the Mumo brother and lunges at him. However, the Constable and Gravis appear and talk down the furious Jedi as the Constable's children are returned. Gravis meets with Griff and confides that he bought off the other senators on behalf of Losan Industries in exchange for their support of his own Senate seat. Soon after the outbreak of the riots on Terrace, Thalion pulled off the planet, and Gravis attempted to change his mind by threatening to go public with the bribes. Griff is shocked as Thalion hails the party. The Mumo brother flips sides, revealed to be Thalion's agent, and attacks Gravis. Rana Te then arrives and attacks the bounty hunter, as Thalion activates a hidden bomb in Griff's briefcase. However, the bomb doesn't go off, likely due to a stray blaster bolt in the adventure leading to the meeting. Meanwhile, Zayne learns that Shell financed a bounty on him with the money Zayne's father wired her. Zayne had thought the money from his adventures could be used to help Shell and her younger brother, but Shell still believes he is the Padawan killer. Rana Te then arrives, and attempts to convince a distraught Shell of Zayne's fall to darkness. Garvis interrupts the argument to relay news that Cassus Fett will arrive at the Jedi Tower soon to review the Mandalorian operations. Elsewhere, Jarael trains in combat with Roland and Alec, as a tentative attraction begins to grow between her and the Jedi. And back on Terrace, plans are formed to storm the Jedi Tower, as Garvis seeks to bomb it using the new technology acquired from Griff's briefcase. Zayne is hesitant, worrying about potential civilian casualties near and in the tower. Zayne, Rana, and Shell are chosen to infiltrate it. Pulling Shell aside, Rana tells her she will teach her how to build her own lightsaber in order to kill Zayne if she must. Rana additionally recalls how 25 years ago, as a Padawan, she overheard Krinda Dre muttering about a mysterious prophecy. And in the time of tribulation to come, there will be 5. One for the darkness and one for the light. Another from the darkness stands in the light, while one from the light stands in the darkness. The last one stands apart from all, and between them, all that has been built will fall. Presently, she follows Gadon as the rebels infiltrate the Jedi Tower. Zayne and Shell, who poses as his prisoner, also make their way over. Shell remains unconvinced of Zayne's innocence, and as they reach the storage level, grabs a nearby lightsaber. But Zayne mentions how much he misses her brother, Shad, and Shell cannot bring herself to ignite the weapon. As Zayne leaves to the upper levels, Rana appears and scolds Shell for being unable to finish the deed. She rushes after Zayne, who has discovered the Mandalorians have actually abandoned the tower and plan to attack the rebels soon. Rana finds Zayne and lunges at him, ignoring his warnings of Cassus Fett's movements. Elsewhere, the rebels begin a frantic evacuation as an enraged Rana and Zayne duel. Zayne uses his jetpack to fly above her and opens fire with his blaster, but she shatters the glass room and destroys his equipment. Rana remains convinced that Zayne will bring down the Republic and moves in for the killing blow. Suddenly, Shell then appears from behind and stabs her through the stomach. As Rana collapses, Shell falls into Zayne's arms, telling him she now knows he didn't kill the Padawans. Griff and Gadon fly in on a speeder to rescue Zayne and Shell. Rana somehow staggers back to her feet and leaps after Zayne but cannot make it off the roof. Zayne turns around and offers her his hand, telling her she can still be saved from her lightsaber wounds. However, Rana refuses to confess and calls up her lightsaber with the Force, but Griff detonates the bombs wired across the Jedi Tower and the building collapses. As Rana falls to her death, she tells Zayne to tell a mysterious Krinda that she's sorry. Zayne now has another name to hunt, as elsewhere Masters Cornelia and Lucian Dre sense another part of their scheme has been uncovered. Later on Coruscant, Cornelia has another foreboding vision. A Rakghoul army with military structure and ships has attacked the planet and is led by the Dark Lord Carnas Mur, with a dark, hooded Sith behind him. Zayne Carrick then appears and tells her the vision is currently happening as he speaks. Several other strange figures show up, which the reader recognizes as Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and Cade Skywalker. Cornelia then exits the vision, where she and the other Terrace Masters are having a funeral service for Rana Teh. The Seers confer, convinced that the Mur talisman will play a key role in events to come. The talisman is a relic of a bygone age, when the ancient Sith battled each other nearly a millennium ago. It seems to be able to control life, and the Masters believe it may be somewhere on Terrace given the infestation of Rakghouls in the lower city. However, they now worry what may happen if Zayne comes to possess the artifact. Lucian Dre decides to send a shadow agent after Zayne, determined to snuff out both threats at the same time. Meanwhile, the Terrace Constable is currently in the Undercity, fighting for her life against a horde of Rakghouls. She is saved by a strange woman wielding a golden lightsaber, but is scratched on the arm by one of the monsters. The woman reignites her saber, telling the constable she will soon transform into one of the horde, and kills her. Then, an explosion rocks the chamber, and she turns to see none other than Griff and Zayne run across the hall, chased by another horde. She saves them too, and leaves them behind after learning they weren't hurt. However, Zayne and Griff were kicked out of a nearby outcast village when Griff let the gate open, and decide to follow the rescuer. They learn her name is Celeste Morn, a Jedi, and another explosion causes the floor to collapse from under them. Zayne wakes up in a deep chamber, where he, Griff, and Celeste have encountered a team of Mandalorians who seem to be excavating for something. They are led by Pulsifer, the assistant to the scientist Demagal. Pulsifer finds the Mur talisman in the ruins they're searching, and the Mandalorians fly back up to the surface. Celeste, and a reluctant Zayne and Griff, pursue them back up and manage to stow away on the Mandalorian ship. Pulsifer flies to the ice world of Jebel, where he looks to study the Mur talisman to unlock its powers. He hopes a Jedi Master's financial records may hold the key, something that piques Griff's interest. In event, Celeste tries to use the Force to manipulate Pulsifer to throw the talisman into the void of space. However, the magic and spirit of Carnas Mur work against her, and it latches onto Pulsifer's arm, electrocuting him and another Mandalorian. They leave the ship for medical assistance, with Celeste trailing them. Zayne and Griff try to follow, but are caught and thrown into a large group of prisoners. They learn that many outlaws in prison were freed by the Mandalorians and recruited into their army. The next point of attack will be Alderaan, a defenseless core world. Zayne begins to try and find a way to escape and warn the Republic, and sees Celeste hiding in the shadows. He and Griff, who has found a suit of Mandalorian armor, reunite with her and manage to sneak inside Pulsifer's base. Griff then accidentally triggers his weapon, causing yet another cave-in. A squad of Mandalorians then shows up, but one transforms into a rock ghoul. The plague has reached Jebel. The bite victims begin to transform faster than normal, and some even gain the ability to use weapons. Additionally, because they are wearing Mandalorian Neo-Crusader armor, they are substantially harder to kill. Zayne and Celeste run, knowing they must prevent the plague from spreading to the recruits and potentially the rest of the galaxy. Celeste learns of Zayne's innocence and the prophecy of the Jedi Covenant as the base begins to fall into chaos. Meanwhile, Griff manages to survive and make his way to the command center. He finds a datapad with a recording from Lucian Dre. It is revealed that Celeste Morn is one of Dre's shadow agents, sent to recover the Mur Talisman. At the same time, Celeste hails Lucian from Jebel, bringing him up to date on the Plague and Talisman, but confiding that killing Zayne may not be the right move. Zayne then arrives to a troubled Celeste, and patches in to talk with Cassius Fett himself. However, Fett is skeptical of his warning, and abruptly ends the communication. Zayne then decides to go back into the base to find and rescue Griff. However, he is captured by rock ghouls, who do not kill him but instead take him to Pulsifer. The scientist looks to use the talisman to finish the Mandalorian crusade, but needs Zayne's help to unlock its secrets. Then, the talisman leaps off Pulsifer's arm, abandoning him. It attaches onto Zayne as Celeste arrives. She grabs the talisman, which seems to be drawn to Jedi. It attaches to her chest, granting her control over the rock ghouls, but locking her into a battle of wills with Karnas Mur at the same time. Celeste Morn becomes a military general for the rock ghouls as the Mandalorians arrive on Jebel. A vicious battle breaks out, with Zayne looking on in horror as Celeste commands the bloodthirsty horde. Griff is found, and Zayne learns that Celeste works for Lady Krinda and the Covenant. Celeste is greatly troubled, the amulet of Karnas Mur slowly corrupting her mind and driving her to darkness. She asks Zayne to kill her, but instead he brings her to an artifact of Pulsifer. It is the oubliette of Lord Drapa, an isolation chamber that cannot be pierced by the senses. Though it is intended to be a torture chamber, Celeste decides to lock herself inside to protect the galaxy from Karnas Mur. She gives Zayne a key, telling him she was supposed to take the talisman to the Sanctum of the Exiled on Ojran, where there are Covenant researchers who may be able to help her. Zayne and Griff leave Celeste, but the Horde has fallen back to mindlessness and begins to attack them once more. Then, another ship arrives. It is the Last Resort, piloted by Jarael, Alec, Roland, Shell, and Slisk. They bombard the surface, and Alec seems to be amazed at the power of the Mur Talisman. Now, Zayne decides to ask his friends to help him take down the Covenant itself. On Coruscant, Master Lucian Dre is inducted into the Jedi High Council. His first action is to report of a supposed insurrection within the Mandalorians on Jebel and a stalling in their advances. Lucian believes the Jedi will no longer be needed to resolve the conflict, and suggests the revanchist movement within the Order has been proven wrong. He argues the pro-war renegades, including the Jedi Alec, must be recalled. However, in the shadows, Master Vrook and Vandar are suspicious of Lucian's sudden rise, and wonder who has orchestrated his ascension. Lucian then receives a secret comm from Hazen, and learns that Celeste Morn's mission was a success. Meanwhile, Zayne, Griff, and Jarael infiltrate the Sanctum of the Exalted, where they discover that the Covenant has been storing Sith artifacts, rather than destroying them as Celeste had believed. They begin the tedious process of collecting mountains of evidence to be sent back to Alec. However, right before they plan to depart, as Zayne and Griff sneak back into the ship, they are captured by native Fiorans. Their leader is the Terris Jedi Master Feln, the exalted and elder of their people. The xenophobic Fiorans, however, believe that the Master's allowance of Jedi and outsiders to visit the Sanctum has resulted in stormy weather, indicative of the sky's fury. Then, Feln himself arrives and imprisons Zayne and Griff. He hails Lucian, believing that Zayne killed Celeste and took the key, and is consequently already corrupted by the Mur Talisman. Feln is ordered to destroy the Sanctum, a sacrilegious act, but then Hazen patches in, saying the artifacts must instead be transported elsewhere. Feln returns to Zayne and prepares to kill him by lightsaber. but the Fiorans interject, saying that since Zayne technically entered the sanctum, he must instead be killed in hand-to-hand combat. They brawl, with Zayne knocking Feln down and running away. He is chased down as news arrives that Jerail's ship has returned. A furious Feln believes they are going to raid the sanctum and detonates several bombs. However, the explosions sweep towards the village as well, destroying everything. Feln is killed by the Fiorans, who decide to rebuild elsewhere away from the Jedi and Sith. Though Zayne's recordings were destroyed, the Mumo brothers, as it turns out, had stolen several artifacts for themselves, allowing for some intel to be recovered. News of Feln's death and Zayne's evidence reaches Lucian and the remaining members of the Watch Circle. Lucian contacts Admiral Carrick, telling him Zayne is working for the Mandalorians and plans to invade Coruscant. He believes it is necessary they prevent the evidence from reaching the Jedi. Everything thus far has unfolded according to the Seer's prophecy, and Master Zammar is now sent by Lucian to join Karath in the Republic Navy. Meanwhile, Masters Vendar and Vrook visit a cantina, having been contacted in secret by Zayne and his friends. They meet Shell and Alec, who now poses as Captain Malak, and learn that Zayne wishes to meet with them on Coruscant. However, Admiral Karath and Master Zammar are in orbit with the Navy looking to intercept him. Karath enslaves all the ship's drives to his own flagship to create an impenetrable uniform blockade. Zayne's ship arrives, and is approached by a security patrol led by Karth Onasi. Onasi gives orders only to shoot to disable, as Karath orders a troubled Zammar to take a fighter out to confront Zayne. The prophecy continues to unfold before the Jedi's eyes, for it was foretold he would die by friendly fire. Zayne's ship is battered, but he takes a small cargo freighter out with Griff and sneaks his way onto the surface. Jerail crash lands the main ship on Karath's flagship, where she is captured. However, they are followed and captured by Zammar. Meanwhile, Vendar and Vrook talk more with Malak, and come to terms with the depths of the Covenant's schemes. Vrook worries the Jedi Order itself will be torn apart if Zayne's accusations come to light, and Zammar then appears holding his lightsaber to Zayne and Griff's throats. Zayne is taken to the Dre estate, where he sees firsthand the military might of Crinda Dre. She is renowned for her divination work within the Jedi, an effort that stems from the failures of her master. For Master Vodo was the teacher of Exar Kun, a powerful Jedi who fell to darkness and started the disastrous Sith War with the Republic. Her order is devoted to watching for the Sith constantly, and Zammar surrendered himself to punishment in exchange for immunity for Crinda. They plan, however, to draw Crinda out by pretending Zayne has become a Sith, for Zammar no longer trusts the intentions of Lucian. In the main chamber, Zayne and Griff are brought before Lucian, who draws his blade. Zammar asks to see Crinda, but Hazen appears, claiming she is occupied with Circle Kulu. Coruscant Jedi wait outside, ready to storm Lucian's forces once Zammar is able to safely extract Crinda. Zayne feigns an outburst, telling Hazen of the artifacts stolen from Ondrin. Zammar is sent to retrieve them, and Hazen approaches Zayne. He lunges out, grabbing the fake talisman hiding Zayne's lightsaber. The ploy falls apart as Zammar opens the main gates, and the Jedi strike. The Covenant battles the High Council operatives as Hazen sends word to Covenant cells across the planet, signaling the beginning of an insurrection. Lucian is taken off guard, for this is the fruit of Hazen and only Hazen's schemes. By orchestrating the Jedi Master's rise, he was granted access to vast resources that allowed the web of the Covenant to grow, infiltrating the Council itself as a contingent if the Sith rose again. As the fighting unfolds, Kara's fleet then arrives. Hazen bombs the sky bridge and hacks into Kara's network, commanding the fleet to open fire on the battling Jedi below. Zammar is killed, and Hazen claims the prophecy of the Five is fulfilled. Lucian recalls how Hazen used to be a Jedi, and his relationship with the Force mirrored Zayne's in many ways. He was not a gifted Padawan, and was helped often by Barristan Dre, who was close at the time with Crinda Hulis. Hazen was not knighted, a decision he met with outrage. He believed Barristan and Crinda were knighted not because of their stronger gifts with the Force, but rather their wealth. He lashed out at the Masters and his friends, accusing them of favoring the rich and using money to bend the rules. Barristan was furious and struck Hazen, knocking him down. Hazen would never be a Jedi, but as a former page of the Dre estate, he was allowed by Barristan to remain in his service. 10 years passed, and Barristan became a renowned warrior in the Sith War. Until Prawa, Hazen was assigned to gather Jedi bodies when he encountered Dossa, a bounty hunter from his past as a Padawan. Still bitter about his rejection, Hazen came with an agreement with Dossa to betray Barristan and the Jedi Knights. He led them down a dark chasm into a trap laced with several bombs, but Dossa betrayed him and detonated the explosives before Hazen could make it out of the blast zone. He was saved by Sith medics, and given unique prosthetics that cloud the Jedi's perception of himself and his intentions in the Force. Dossa tells him that more of the artifacts of the Sith will unlock further powers. It was after this chain of events that Hazen returned to serve the Dreys and helped Krinda form the Covenant, while his malice and hatred remained ever a secret. Now, Hazen hacks the Vandervalis chain of Kara's fleet, inducing it to open fire on Coruscant. Lucian attacks Hazen, but his former aide is covered in Sith artifacts and repels him with the gauntlet of Kresh the Younger. Several Council Jedi burst in, but are quickly electrocuted. Zayne confronts Lucian, who accuses him of being unable to strike down clear threats like Hazen and Celeste Morn when necessary. Hazen unveils his grand plan, for he believes a different Five will fulfill the prophecy of Five, and not the Terrorist Masters as originally believed. Master Cornelia is the light in the darkness. Griff is from the darkness, but chose light. Zayne is for the light, and Hazen and Lucian are the remaining two. Hazen claims he stands apart from both light and dark, having served the Covenant and mastering deception in the ways of the Sith. He goes so far as to call himself Darth Hayes, and proclaims Lucian will be a servant of darkness, destined to train his Sith Order. Cornelia recovers from the blast and races away to find Krinda with Griff. Zayne tries to follow, but is stopped by Lucian, who still believes Zayne poses a threat to his mother. Griff and Cornelia find Krinda in a meditation chamber, but she seems to be comatose. Cornelia is distraught, believing the prophecy of the Rogue Moon as well as Zayne's warning years ago to be fulfilled. Griff tears down the foundation of her beliefs by exposing flaws in her interpretations of each prophecy, and Cornelia soon realizes she and the other masters were blinded by foresight. Griff then realizes the glass case that Krinda is in is an oubliette, and that she may barely be alive. Meanwhile, an enraged Lucian chases Zayne, but is stopped when Griff appears with his mother. A dying Krinda confronts Lucian, knowing he was responsible for the Padawan's deaths. Lucian responds that she was the one who taught him the mission precedes everything, and Krinda repents, telling her son to face the future with humility as she dies. Lucian attacks Zayne, who tries to talk him down and urge his former master to choose his own future, instead of continuing to be Hazen's pawn. Meanwhile, Hazen, unaware of Krinda's death, kills the Covenant Jedi guarding his Sith artifacts. He plans for the High Council to be entirely wiped out, upon which Lucian and Krinda will announce the foundation of an emergency council in their name. Hazen, however, will control everything from the shadows. Griff spies on Hazen, but a dueling Zayne and Lucian burst out of the estate. As they fight, a statue of Barristan is weakened and falls on Lucian. Griff watches as Zayne stabs down, ending the duel mercilessly. Zayne then approaches Hazen, asking him to stop bombarding Coruscant. Hazen looks down on Zayne with pity, and promises to help him find his full potential in the Force. Zayne then lunges forward, and with his lightsaber cuts off the gauntlet of Kresh, which also has the commands for the Republic fleet's guns. Lucian then strides forward, alive after all, and throws Zayne and Griff away to safety. He takes the gauntlet and orders one last shot. The fleet of Karath opens fire, annihilating the Dre estate. The plots of Hazen are hastily covered up by the Republic in the aftermath, and the deaths of the Dre family are mourned. The Padawan's families are told the truth of the murders, and the bounties on Zayne and Griff are lifted. However, there still remains a schism within the Jedi Order, as Malak and the other revanchists remain set on fighting in the war. Zayne is offered to be knighted, but declines, instead wanting to continue working with Griff. It is revealed that Lucian Dre somehow survived. Now blinded, he recalls how during the bombardment, he saw his destiny as a Lord of Pain. However, he rejected that future, and he is now on a private sanctum moon, secretly acquired with the funds of his family. Here, Lucian has formed a true covenant, one that embodies the ideals of his mother and father and was kept a secret from Hazen. Its goal is now to preserve the teaching of the Jedi, not to avert foretold dooms. Zayne and his friends disrupt a trading session on Matelos 3, where bidders jockey for possession of valuable plots of space and the sky that have valuable mining bodies. Griff poses as a professor, and Roland and Jarrell interrupt the proceedings as pirates. They hope to claim a share of the deal, with Griff seemingly representing them as their lawyer. However, the overseer of the exchange, Master Nunk, is suspicious of the three. He sends a security team to detain Griff, Jarrell, and Roland. Jarrell and Roland are beaten down, and Griff is nearly pushed out a window into the vacuum of space. However, Zayne arrives and rescues him, and they follow Nunk and the captive Jarrell and Roland to the ship Dust Skimmer. Zayne boards the crew's current ship, a run-down gem miner, and scolds Griff for swindling honest traders. Griff retorts by saying the exchange and Nunk are really being controlled by the Raft Syndicate. Zayne then notices Slisk, who used to work for them, and begins to devise a plan. Meanwhile, Roland and Jarrell are suspended by chains under a filtered ceiling. The protective covering above is removed, which will expose them to the deadly nearby sun and cook them alive in a matter of minutes. Roland urges Jarrell to tap into her faint connection to the Force so they can escape. Elsewhere, Slisk, Zayne, and Griff barge into the Nunk's negotiation room. Griff accuses Nunk of embezzlement and skimming Syndicate funds, and manages to trick him into traveling to Jebel. Nunk's Chev slaves are freed, and it turns out Jarrell and Roland were able to free themselves. The crew reunite, and Roland suggests that Zayne begin training Jarrell in the ways of the Force. The exchange carries on, with the mining rights being sold to the traders despite Zayne attempting to tell the auction bidders of the false promises of riches on the Talbos. Sometime later, Zayne sits in the hot prospect in front of the droid Elby, who has not spoken in weeks. Their ship comes across a luxury cruiser of the ultra-rich of the Republic, lost and stranded in space near the core. They board it and find dozens of suffocated bodies floating inside. Zayne encounters a survivor named Toki Tolivar and his droid KO, and surprisingly, Elby rises to help clear the bodies. Soon, however, Roland realizes the dead passengers did not suffocate, but were instead strangled. Zayne suddenly realizes something is wrong in the Force, and rushes away to find Slisk choking. Roland saves him by cutting a small slit in his throat, and Toki then arrives. He wonders if KO was somehow responsible, but assures Zayne that the droid is not programmed to hurt anyone. Zayne then finds KO talking with Elby, and impulsively lunges forward and cuts off KO's hands. KO then reveals it came into the service of Toki shortly after the Sith War. Additionally, on several business trips with Toki, it seems all his business associates died, seemingly by the same cause of death. Zayne is horrified, and runs back to Jarrell and Roland. It turns out the unassuming Toki is a Sith assassin, and is now strangling Jarrell with the Force. Zayne intercedes, and duels Toki in a lightsaber battle. But a light fixture is brought crashing down on his head, and KO arrives and wraps up Toki. Roland then shoots the droid, killing both KO and Toki. A dismayed Zayne tells Roland he didn't have to kill them, but Roland replies saying he is no good to him if he cannot protect Jarrell. Later, in orbit above the world of Pantalomen, a gladiator named Gothar Cleach retires from fighting after winning the solo aerials for the 4th consecutive time. He is part of the dueling realm controlled by the franchise, located centrally in Jervo's world, controlled by Lozon Industries. Zayne and Jarrell have traveled here for pleasure, as Zayne was a huge fan of swoop racing in his youth. They head to the Hall of Champions, where they meet Griff. He has another scheme up his sleeve, for Griff has learned there is a slight delay between the holo feeds and the betting circles. He looks to con Jervo Thalion, but Zayne then overhears that Gothar's retired bike is being offered as a prize for the winner of the Amateur Open. He quickly signs up, frustrating Griff and Jarrell. Elsewhere, it is revealed that Gothar spoke up against the cruel treatment of fighters in his retirement speech. The franchise detains him and threatens the life of his son, Albin, by putting him in the Amateur Open. Aubin is relatively inexperienced, but the franchise needs someone of the Kleege name in the race. The other racers are instructed to let Aubin live, and Gothar is also put in the open. He is told they will only be allowed to live if they both win. Meanwhile, Jarail watches Zayne win his qualifiers while refusing to participate in Griff's scheme, feeling it to be morally wrong. Roland then makes the mistake of leaving the ship to check on Jarail, and is quickly caught and detained by security forces. Griff saves him by also entering Roland in the open. Roland soon reunites with Zayne, who then meets Aubin for the first time. Gothar arrives, and reveals Aubin is being driven mad by electromagnetic feedback from his head cones. Zayne meets his childhood hero, who ironically threatens his life and makes him promise to keep Aubin alive in the open. Zayne and Aubin manage to narrowly survive the semifinals and advance to the finals of the Open. In the other semifinal, Roland and Gothar also advance. Jarail wakes up from a nightmare and tells Zayne why Gothar is still fighting. Zayne realizes the franchise is in the business of enslavement and is crestfallen. He talks more with Gothar and learns the slaver gang feeding the franchise was led by a mysterious woman. Roland arrives and asks Zayne why he's been hesitant lately to train Jarail in the Force. Meanwhile, a furious Jervo discovers the existence of Griff and his companions on his station and demands they all be killed. The franchise controller of the Open assures them the races will be fixed to a favorable outcome as Griff eavesdrops from a vent. The time of the final arrives, with Jervo sending the Togorian sisters, a Tyloon Nightsoarer, and a Mandalorian giant against Zayne and the others. As the final unfolds, the sisters shoot Roland, stunning him. Gothar's bike is sabotaged, and Zayne and Gothar save Aubin from the Mandalorian giant despite their malfunctioning equipment. They fly back to the main arena, where Gothar crashes his speeder through a window and he, Zayne, and Aubin break into the concourse. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Griff has a plan to save everyone and expose the franchise. He sabotages the musicians, causing Gothar's retirement speech to be played over the speakers. Roland overcomes the sisters and wins the Open, as Zayne, Aubin, and Gothar were disqualified for leaving the arena. They meet up with Jarail, but Gothar is stunned upon seeing her markings. He pushes Zayne away, telling him to leave him and his son alone. Jarail reveals to a stunned Zayne that in her past, she was actually a slaver. Elsewhere, a disgraced Jervo meets with an emissary of the Crucible organization named Shantique, severing his connections with them. However, Shantique kills him, and now begins to hunt Jarail, who she is somehow connected to. Zayne and his friends travel to War Tandel for a vacation, but Jarail remains cagey about her past, not wanting to tell Zayne more about the Crucible slaving gang she was a part of. She does reveal that she was kidnapped as a child and forced to fight in the slave pens. Jarail challenged a Minder, another slave put in charge of overseeing the practice duels, and won. She was eventually able to escape with the help of Camper. Jarail heads back to the Hot Prospect only to find Malak, while Zayne heads into a nearby town. He sees a Republic cruiser, which it turns out is searching for him and his crew. A Jedi named Pharaoh warmly greets Zayne, for he was one of the Jedi rescued from Flashpoint. Pharaoh reveals the Jedi have finally joined the war against the Mandalorians. He tells Zayne that some years ago, he returned to his home world of Cathar to find it completely empty of his people, the likely result of Mandalorian aggression. Pharaoh is part of the Revanchists, a faction of the Jedi headed by Malak and his master. The Revanchists investigated Cathar with little aid from the High Council, but found nothing substantial. Then, their leader found a Mandalorian mask and picked it up. The Jedi on Cathar then had a vision, where Cassus Fett and the Mandalorians drove the defenseless Cathar into the sea, killing them all in a mass genocide. The helmet the Revanchist leader found was from one of the Mandalorians who disagreed with the order to kill the natives. The leader then donned the mask, vowing to not remove it until justice was made. And from then on, the Revanchist leader was known as Revan, who swore an oath to utterly defeat the Mandalorians. The genocide finally swayed the High Council, who allowed Revan and his followers to enter the war. Elsewhere, Malak is telling Griff and Jarail the same story, and asks Jarail to join the Revanchist cause. Roland firmly disagrees, and Malak turns and attacks him. He pushes Roland down into a campfire as Zayne and the other Jedi arrive in time to pull him back. Zayne kisses Jerael and tells the Revanchists they will decline the offer to join. Malak flies away and becomes determined to focus entirely on the war. Zayne tells Jerael he has made several connections since the fall of the Covenant, and now asks her to help him take down the Crucible. Their first mission is to disrupt the dust diving operations of the Crucible, which works with the Sungrazer Corporation. Sungrazer has to import slaves from the Crucible to meet its quota of workers in the dangerous field. Zayne and Jerael break into a Sungrazer ship and confront its head officer. They pose as Crucible operatives, claiming the price for slaves has increased. The ruse is bought, and Zayne and Jerael make their way below deck to where the slaves are held. It is revealed that Jerael used to work on the exact same ship they're on, but Zayne kept this information a secret from Griff at her request. Zayne encounters a slave named Cone, who tells him there are 80 divers on the ship. However, the ship officer soon realizes he has been tricked, and sends security after Zayne and Jerael. They are forced to join the dive onto the comet with the other miners, and Zayne frantically hails Griff, telling him there is something valuable on the comet to get him to rescue everyone. As the miners begin to be evacuated, a Crucible ship suddenly appears, piloted by Dace Galliard. He is another figure from Jerael's past, and a drone soon captures her. Zayne rescues her, and with the help of Roland they make it back to the hot prospect. The Crucible opens fire on the outgunned renegades, but they fire their drill into the underbelly of the ship as Roland plants several explosives. However, the hot prospect cannot jump to hyperspace. Zayne then deactivates the ship's mining centrifuge, which causes it to rapidly spin and gain distance from their foes. They drop off the miners at a refugee camp, as Jerael finally tells Roland and Griff the full story of her past. And elsewhere, a disgraced Galliard is brought before Shantique and her superior, Magister Protector Bar-Injar. On Coruscant, a badly hurt Demigal suddenly stirs, awakening from a long coma. Shantique, the Magister and Presser of the Crucible, returns to its base world of Volgax with Galliard. It is revealed that sometime later, Zayne has actually infiltrated Volgax, posing as a captured Navy lieutenant. He begins a brutal, unforgiving training regimen, and befriends a fellow Kamasi slave named Rothar Satan. Rothar has the memories of all the Kamasi who have been on Volgax before him, and is thus burdened with hundreds of years of suffering. The agony overwhelms Zayne, who collapses and is discovered by Shantique. She now knows he is a Jedi and is connected with Jerael, and brings him to her quarters. Zayne is distraught, not understanding how Jerael could have been involved in such a barbaric industry. Shantique tells him Jerael's real name is Edessa, and that her face tattoos mean destroyer in the language of the Crucible. His tracking device is discarded, and elsewhere Jerael and Griff frantically try to find Zayne. Jerael uses Elby to get in contact with Shell to see if she can try and help. Shantique continues to manipulate Zayne, and reveals she was a companion of Jerael until they were both sold to the Crucible. Shantique became the overseer that Jerael overthrew, and she claims she did so by stabbing her in the back. Eventually, Shantique found her way back to the Crucible, and Zayne now tries to talk her away from the life of slavery. However, he is instead sent to duel Rothar with live blades. At the training grounds, Rothar confides to Zayne that the Crucible is actually a machine of some sorts, created by the ancient Sith Lord Eldis to subject people into vast armies. Though Eldis is long dead, the Crucible now only looks to survive and persevere, using refugees to create vast slave armies. The duel then begins, with Zayne refusing to pick up a weapon to kill Rothar. He is knocked down, but then Rothar takes his own blade and stabs himself. The Crucible evacuates Volgax as Zayne is left on the surface. He is found by Jerael, who learned of the Crucible's location from Shell. He lashes out at her, having believed Shantique's story. Jerael, however, says they should part ways, and that the markings on her face mean protector, not destroyer. Back on Coruscant, a fully awake Demigal is brought to trial. He knows of nothing since Flashpoint, and only shakingly asks to see a Jedi he met there. Malak then summons Zayne to Coruscant to testify in the trial, also telling him his forces have reclaimed the ship Arcanian Legacy. Roland and Jerael have separated from Griff and Zayne, and Zayne reveals to Griff he has been using their group funds for a special project of his. Griff also tells him that after Socorro, he and Slisk were rewarded by the Republic and able to set up a successful restaurant chain on Coruscant. Elby then speaks up with a stunning revelation. It is revealed that after the escape from Flashpoint, Roland somehow lost 4 kilos. Zayne and Griff recall oddities from Roland in the time since, and realize that Jarael is actually being accompanied by Demagal. At the trial, an enraged Malak confronts who he believes to be Demagal, but is actually Roland. His restraints are broken, and the crowd turns ugly and Roland is rushed out. He desperately tries to tell the security forces the truth, but it turns out Zayne and Griff are his rescuers. And elsewhere, Demagal reveals his true identity to Jarael as they fly through hyperspace. They are traveling to Osadia, and Demagal tells her his real name is Antos Wyrick, master of the Osadia school. He proclaims himself a protector of Jarael and the other students he has lost, and calls her Edessa, his triumph. As Malak leads the manhunt for Demagal, Roland, Zayne, and Griff hide away in a shed. Roland reveals that Antos Wyrick was kidnapped by the cruel Iskaloni cyborgs as a young child. He was freed by the Mandalorians and learned their ways, becoming a top lieutenant of Mandalore the Indomitable. But when Mandalore was bested by the Dark Lord Ulic Qel-Droma in a fair fight, Antos became obsessed with discovering the secret behind Force powers. He came across the robe of the Jedi Master Arca Jeth in Ulic's cabin, and thus gained access to Jeth's DNA. Antos re-entered the service of the Mandalorians after the Sith War, and formed a research colony on Osadia. It was there he endeavored on his greatest project, to create a race of Force-sensitive Mandalorian knights using the genetics of Master Arca. Although his efforts were unsuccessful, he gained some ground with the children of offshoots. Edessa, or Jarael, was supposedly the first of these Force-sensitive children. However, offshoot parents were of short supply, so Wyrick got in contact with the Crucible for slaves. But he was betrayed, and the Crucible attacked his colony on Osadia, abducting the children. It is also revealed that Shantique may be Antos' own daughter, and that he may have thrown her out after discovering she could not become one of his Mandalorian knights. Presently, Jarael and Wyrick have landed on Osadia to find the Crucible has already arrived. Wyrick tells Jarael her gifts will even the odds, and reaches into his cloak to give her a weapon. Zayne shows the others, including Shell, a secret base he has built called Rogue Moon Project Command. It was created by Zayne with the families of the terrorist Padawans, and its main goal is to protect the regular people affected by the war. Slisk then shows Griff and Zayne a microtag, which turns out to be the label for a Sith artifact taken by Antos Wyrick. It is for the double-bladed lightsaber of the Sith Lord Exar Kun, and Zayne realizes that Jarael is now in danger of falling to the dark side. He decides that to find her, they must go through Captain Galliard, and tells Roland to call Cassus Fett. Elsewhere near the Ethor system, Admiral Karath receives an anonymous tip of an impending Mandalorian attack. Among his fleet is Captain Galliard, but mysteriously the Mandalorians all jump to hyperspace immediately after appearing. Zayne then hails Karath, telling him Galliard is a pirate. His ship is promptly turned on and captured. Cassus Fett thanks Zayne for previously saving his people on Jebel, telling him their debt is settled and that he has no love for Demagal. Roland is told to remain out of sight and is presumed dead, and Galliard is caught and brought before Karath. They learn that Shantique and Jarael will be on Osadia. Meanwhile, Jarael attacks the Crucible agents surrounding the school, wielding Exar Kun's brilliant blue blade. Demagal confronts Baranjar, demanding to know where his children have been taken. After getting nothing, he shoots him and tells Jarael to investigate the training hall, becoming more enraged by the minute. Elsewhere, as Zayne flies through hyperspace on the ship Testament, Griff asks him about his unusual relationship with the Force. For it seems Zayne is perpetually beset by bad luck when planning schemes, but by good luck when things go poorly in their adventures. It is an odd balancing act of sorts, one that Zayne has only come to terms with recently. Jarael finds the training hall empty, except for one figure. It is Shantique, a reckoning from her past. They begin to fight, and Jarael manages to disarm Shantique, moving in for a killing blow. But then, Zayne drops in through the roof, carried by Roland. He stands in front of Jarael as Shantique picks up Exar Kun's lightsaber. They begin to duel, and Zayne reasserts his faith in Jor-El and tells Shantique the truth about Antos Wyrip, her father. Using the powers of Exar Kun's blade to enhance her intuition, Shantique realizes he is telling the truth. Elsewhere, Demagal frantically searches the compound and is attacked by Rolan. He is knocked down, but somehow manages to force push Rolan away, knocking him out. Shantique revels in the darkness she feels from the lightsaber, feeling her destiny is back in her own hands. But Antos appears and stabs her in the back, scorning his daughter and asking where the viable children are. He walks to the schoolyard where he confronts Jor-El and Zayne. There, Shantique reveals the children were all killed, crushing Antos' spirits. Zayne and Rolan then tell them Jor-El is evidence that none of the children were actually Force sensitive. Instead, the Force was strong in Antos and Shantique. Antos has been unwittingly hiding his Force powers for years and turned against his own daughter. Then, Shantique leaps at him with a bloody knife. Antos calls forth the lightsaber of Exar Kun and ignites it, stabbing her through the stomach. But the other blade also ignites and stabs him as well. Father and daughter collapse, dead, and Zayne, Jor-El, and Rolan prepare to return to Coruscant. Several days later, Zayne apologizes to Jor-El for doubting her, and as an apology brings her parents to Coruscant. Griff and Sliss settle down in their restaurant, where Griff plans to spy on their wealthy patrons. Zayne decides to set out on his own path, and he and Jor-El begin a romantic relationship, 1 year after they first met. More and more Jedi have entered the Mandalorian War at the behest of the Revanchists. They support the local militias ferried by the Republic, as the government does not have its own official military. As he is not part of the Order, Zayne has become part of one of these militias on a campaign on Essien. During a skirmish, his commander Dallin Morvis, former subordinate of Admiral Kara, opens fire on unarmed Mandalorians. Zayne tries to protect the retreating Mandalorians as the command skip is blown up. He saves a young, wounded Mandalorian and is punched by Morvis for showing sympathy to the enemy. The Jedi Master Dorjander Case then arrives, informing Morvis and Zayne the Jedi will secure the nearby Mount Savage, and the militias will be needed to flush the Mandalorians out from the forest. Morvis instead proposes they burn down the forest. Zayne is distraught and runs into the forest to try and warn the Mandalorians. He was drafted into the militia on Feda, where his family had moved the previous year. Morvis bombards the forest with Zayne still inside, but he manages to survive. However, Zayne discovers abandoned armor in the forest, realizing it is a ploy by the Mandalorians to draw the Republic Navy in. The Mandalorians attack, and turn out to be led by none other than Master Case. He is the leader of another faction within the Jedi, the Mandalorian Knights. Now, Zayne and his militia are redrafted to fight for Case against the Republic. So Zayne enters another attack, this time for the Mandalorians on the same base he was just defending. He continues to try and protect all the combatants, a decision met with scorn by the Mandalorians he fights alongside with. The base is taken, and Dorjander Case addresses his troops. He and his knights believe the Republic is corrupt, and the Mandalorians offer a better leadership alternative for the galaxy. Morvis tells Zayne they need to warn the Republic, but they are watched closely by their commander Sornell. Zayne asks Sornell to send a message to a friend for him as Morvis falls into a brooding silence. Later that night, Morvis sneaks into Sornell's quarters in an assassination attempt, but is stopped by Zayne. Sornell thanks Zayne for saving him and his family, who are in a nearby room. Morvis is thrown into the slave hut as Case approaches Zayne. He reveals their next point of attack will be Feda, towards the outer rim and away from the core. A massive fleet of dreadnoughts arrives, with enough firepower to obliterate Feda. To protect his family, Zayne is forced to help Case as the fleet flies towards Feda. He hails the Republic Armada, feigning the entire crew of his ship has been taken down by a biological weapon. The compassion of the Republic is exploited, and Case's fleet enters the heart of the defenses. Case looks to secure the relay station for his further goals, while Zayne looks to prevent a disastrous invasion of the entire planet. The station is quickly captured, but Sornell tells a dismayed Zayne his message was able to get through. It was sent to none other than Griff on Coruscant, who Zayne had asked to research Case. He learns that Case was captured by the Mandalorians during the Sith War and became part of their society. After the war, he joined the Jedi High Council and became an outspoken opponent of the Order, joining the Mandalorian War. Though Case was eventually removed from the council, he was able to find a new home with the Revanchists. Now, his current path after rejoining the Mandalorians takes them to Dantooine. There, the Jedi Academy will be attacked, and Case hopes to abduct the students and recruit them into his Mandalorian Knights. Case shows Zayne a picture of his late wife Varda, who was killed by a Republic bomb, and prepares to set off. Zayne decides to sabotage Case's operation, and looks to the imprisoned Captain Morvis for help. He approaches him and asks for aid in stealing a dreadnought. Later, Zayne steals Mandalorian gear and sneaks Morvis's crew out of their prison. He herds them towards a nearby ship, but Morvis is apprehensive about the plan, as Zayne has ordered there be no killings. Zayne lashes out at him, accusing him of leading others to futile deaths and war when they have no choice but to follow his orders. Morvis is shaken, and at last agrees to go along with the mission. So Zayne's crew successfully boards the dreadnought Parjai, and Zayne walks to the bridge and confronts the Marshal. A Mandalorian soldier recognizes him, but Zayne has prepared a contingency. His team feigns madness from a Jedi brain fever, taking advantage of the Mandalorians' superstitious fear of the Order. The real Mandalorians evacuate the dreadnought, and Zayne and his team continue course for Dantooine, their takeover concealed by Sornal. The attack is launched on the Academy, with the Mandalorian Knights in Neo-Crusader armor taking the students hostage. Case rounds up the Padawans as Zayne's team, in Mandalorian armor, drops on the surface to pick them up. Zayne tells Case that Mandalore has issued an order for the students to be taken with the Mandalorians rather than staying with him. The ruse nearly works, but then Case senses Morvis's presence, and their cover is blown. Case confronts Zayne, who surprises him by instead blowing up Case's shuttle. Zayne orders his team to take the students to the dreadnought, but Case recovers in time to fly after them with his jetpack. Zayne leaps out and tackles Case in midair, sending them both crashing back to the ground. They begin to fight, but are interrupted by Sornal. The recent antics of Zayne have convinced the Mandalorian chiefs the Jedi are too much trouble to deal with. The kidnapping of children is also a big taboo in Mandalorian culture, and for those reasons, they are pulling out of Case's operation. Dorjander Case realizes the error of his ways, and surrenders himself to be arrested by the freed masters of the Academy. He is taken back to Coruscant, where Morvis receives awards for capturing a Mandalorian dreadnought. Zayne briefly visits his family in Jarrell before beginning his new assignment. He is now to serve as a diplomatic agent for Morvis on the ship Prosody, acting as the conscience behind his commander's decision-making. The war goes on, and Zayne Carrick flies off into the galaxy, destined for more adventures. Zayne Carrick would fade into the tales of history, but the Mandalorian Wars would continue to rage on. As more Jedi joined the cause of the Revanchists, Revan and Malak gained more and more momentum. They were still operating in defiance of the Jedi Council, despite exposing the atrocities committed by the Mandalorians on several worlds. But their numbers were strong, and their hearts set on the utter defeat of the Mandalorians. Additionally, the Republic still held a significant advantage in industrial might, and had recently developed interdictor-class cruisers that could hinder the Mandalorian fleet's mobility. It was these advantages that Revan and Malak exploited at the Battle of Duro, where their fleet of interdictors prevented the Mandalorians from escaping with raw industrial goods needed to maintain their war effort. So great was the victory of the Republic and the prestige of Revan at this point that Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa appointed him commander of the Republic's military forces. Revan began a brutal campaign, pushing hard for victories no matter the cost of life for both the Mandalorians and the Republic. He and Malak became hardened by the savage war, beginning to embrace, but not yet fall in totality, to the dark side. At some point during the war, they came across ancient ruins on Dantooine. They were once part of the ancient Rakatan species, and it was there Revan and Malak discovered the first star map, a guide to the Star Forge. Constructed thousands of years ago, the Star Forge was a massive automated shipyard, a resource of unparalleled strength for any military. Revan and Malak were intrigued by the prospect of using the Star Forge for themselves and discovered another map on Kashyyyk, but opted to focus on the ongoing war for the time being. Then, on the planet of Malachor V, Revan's fall to the dark side progressed further. He traveled to the Abandoned World, an ancient planet of the Sith, and discovered the Traius Academy. The location of Korriban was then revealed to Revan, but most importantly, he also obtained evidence of the existence of the Sith Empire. Without the knowledge of Malak, he also formed an academy of Sith assassins bound to his will, continuing his fall to darkness. Later, at the Battle of Jaga's Cluster, Malak and Revan were defeated by the fleet of Cassius Fett, but in the battle, Fett killed the Republic fleet commander and fled into deep space. One of the revanchists, Meetra Surik, was promoted to Revan's top general. She was ordered to carry out a series of probing, harassing attacks on Mandalorian strongholds on Duxon and Onderon. Duxon was a brutal campaign that saw heavy Republic losses, but at the same time Revan devastated the Mandalorians at Althir III. The Mandalorians were driven back to the Outer Rim as Meetra beat them away from Duxon. In 3960 BBY, Revan finally readied his forces for a decisive final confrontation at Malachor V. He deployed a massive fleet to lure the Mandalorians in, while at the same time preparing a secret superweapon. Revan planned to use the mass shadow generator designed by the engineer Bao-Dur, which used gravitational anomalies to obliterate anything in close proximity to a planet or on its surface. Meetra Surik took half of his forces to bait the Mandalorians in near orbit, and she was given command over the mass shadow generator as well. A massive battle broke out above Malachor between the fleets of Meetra and Mandalore the Ultimate. Republic reinforcements then began to arrive, effectively swinging the battle in favor of the revanchists. Mandalore the Ultimate, recognizing his inevitable defeat, issued a challenge of single combat to Revan, who answered. They dueled on the Mandalorian flagship, but Mandalore the Ultimate, strong and mighty as he was no match for the power of Revan. He was mortally wounded, and in his dying breaths awoke from the manipulation of the Sith Emperor. He told Revan the Mandalorians had been betrayed, and gave him coordinates to somewhere on the world of Rekiad. Mandalore the Ultimate died, and Revan then took Mandalore's mask and hid it on Rekiad. This was a devastating symbolic blow to the Mandalorians, as without the mask a new Mandalore could not be crowned. The Mandalorians thus became leaderless, relegated once more to working as bounty hunters and mercenaries after the war. Meanwhile, the Republic and Meetra's forces began to drive the Mandalorians back closer to Malachor V. Meetra then gave the order to detonate the mass shadow generator. Thousands of ships were instantly sucked towards the core of the planet, and countless were killed, Republic and revanchists alike. The Mandalorians were decimated, and Revan and Meetra were just outside the weapon's radius. Meetra was the closest Jedi to the carnage, and the wave of death and pain created a massive shockwave in the Force. She instantly cut herself off from the Force as the war came to a dramatic end. Following the devastation of Malachor V, the revanchists were ordered by the Jedi High Council to return to Coruscant to face judgment as the Mandalorians submitted their unconditional surrender. Revan built an assassin droid, HK-47, designed to target specific opponents designated by him. Of the remaining revanchists, only Meetra Surik returned to Coruscant. There, existing now as a wound in the Force, Meetra was banished from the Order and dubbed the Exile. As for Revan and Malak, they refused to return to Coruscant and remained at large with the rest of their loyal followers. Revan journeyed to Rekiad, where he and Malak discovered the tomb of Lord Dramath II. There they both learned for certain of the Sith Empire's existence and of the tale of Nathema. Upon arriving at the desolate world, Revan and Malak learned of the Emperor's rise to power and deemed him to be a great threat to the galaxy. Confident in their strength, the two decided to travel to Dromund Kaas. There, the Sith Empire was discovered, and posing as mercenaries, Revan and Malak lived in its capital of Kaas City for months. They learned much about the Empire, and that eventually, the Emperor sought to invade the Republic itself. But in their pride they overstepped, and Revan and Malak decided to confront and defeat the Emperor themselves. But the Emperor's power was vast, and his will could not be contested. He dominated their minds, completing Revan and Malak's total fall to the dark side. There they became Sith Lords and agents of the Emperor, rechristened as Darth Revan and Darth Malak. The new Sith Lords were then sent to conduct an invasion of the Republic, a further part of the Emperor's plans for assessing the Republic's strength. To rebuild their might in arms, Revan and Malak then set out to find the Starforge and construct a mighty fleet. Only the Emperor knew the truth of their crusade, and even Revan and Malak over time came to believe they were acting on their own accord. They used the star maps to discover the Starforge was located in the Lahone system. Ever they delved deeper into the secrets of the dark side, and after exploiting the Rakatan tribes on Lahone, gained access to the Starforge. Revan betrayed their elder tribe there, who wished to see the forge destroyed. Upon entering the Temple of the Ancients, Revan instead deactivated the disruptor field and left his own Sith holocron in the temple. By now, by the strength of their own powers, Revan and Malak had been able to regain control of their wills from the Sith Empire, though both remained fully seduced by the dark side. With a massive new fleet, they declared themselves lords of a new Sith Empire, with Malak serving as Revan's apprentice. With a sizable contingent of former Republic troops following his orders, the new Sith Lord reclaimed Korriban and revitalized its academy. Revan continued to explore the vast potential of the Starforge. After using it to construct his fleet, he decided to distance himself from the Starforge, for he knew that it had corrupted the Rakatans and brought about the downfall of their infinite empire. However, Revan took a fragment from the forge and discovered otherworldly properties he could have only dreamed of. For the Starforge had the ability to create anything he desired, not just machines. This extended to water, food, and even life itself, and Revan came to believe that in enough time it would be possible to use this infinite engine to bring forth entire galaxies. Darth Malak, however, disagreed with Revan's decision to minimize the usage of the Starforge and began plotting against his master. This tension became palpable between the two until one day Revan and Malak had no other option but to duel. Malak was decisively overpowered, and Revan cut off his jaw, forcing him to wear a prosthesis and vocabulator for the rest of his life. Revan and Malak, with their mighty fleet, then returned to Republic space in an act of war. The former heroes of the Jedi Order had come back as conquerors. Their empire grew rapidly, and in the initial stages of the Jedi Civil War, there was no match for the powers of Darths Revan and Malak. The shipyards of Foros quickly fell to the new Sith, crippling the Republic's military industries, and Admiral Karath of Revan's fleet cowed many worlds into submission by threatening orbital bombardment. Malak claimed the Leviathan as his new flagship with permission from Karath, who now openly shunned the Republic. The Academy at Korriban roared back to life, and many Republic officers and soldiers defected to the Dark Lords, remembering their strength and leadership in past battles. Revan's empire expanded rapidly, coming to control more than one-third of the Republic, but he could not entirely break the government and its Jedi. To bolster his supplies and industrial might, Revan allied with Circa Corporation, a mining organization also specializing in slavery. Then, as a test of Admiral Kara's loyalty, Darth Malak commanded him to bombard the world of Telos 4. The order was carried out, killing millions and creating a toxic atmosphere that would plague the world for years. The family of Cartho Nasi was among the dead. The war continued for 2 more years, and with the power of the Starforge, the Sith had a significant advantage in resources. By 3957 BBY, the Republic knew it was only a matter of time before they were entirely overrun, and decided to conduct a daring operation to cut off the head of the snake. They summoned a team of Jedi, including the promising knight Bastila Shan, for a mission to capture Darth Revan and Darth Malak and cripple the Sith war machine. Bastila was strong in the Force, and had already mastered the power of battle meditation. She and a team of Jedi were sent with a small fleet to the Outer Rim, with the intention of baiting Revan himself into open battle. The plan worked, for Revan's fleet arrived in full force and attacked the Jedi and Republic ships. Bastila was able to board Revan's flagship with a team of Jedi, and they cornered him on the bridge. He stood undaunted, but then Darth Malak saw his chance. For in the chaos of battle, he became separated from Revan and learned of the Jedi infiltration while on the Leviathan. Seizing the moment, Malak opened fire on Revan's ship, intending to kill his master and seize the title of Dark Lord of the Sith for himself. Explosions rocked Revan's ship, killing all the Jedi but Bastila. She sent Revan flying with a force push, and then used the Force to heal him and save his life. A great bond was formed between them at that moment, and Bastila was able to rescue Revan and get him off board. Revan was critically wounded, though not mortally. He was brought to the Jedi Council on Dantooine, where his body was healed. However, the Masters also decided to wipe Revan's memory of when he was a Sith, hoping he could be redeemed or prove to be a new source of intelligence against Malak, who had escaped. The Jedi Council, determined to uncover the source of Revan's fleet and find a way to defeat Darth Malak, then decided to rely on Bastila Shan's unique Force bond with Revan to draw out his buried memories. To protect his identity, they tasked Shan with concealing Revan's past and assigned her command of the Endar Spire, a Hammerhead-class cruiser. Believing himself to be a loyal Republic soldier, Revan was given a fabricated identity and enlisted in the Republic military, serving aboard the Endar Spire. After Revan's fall and the Jedi's intervention, Malak had risen as the new Dark Lord, seizing control of the Sith Empire and keeping the Republic on the defensive. However, Malak's strength lay in martial prowess. He did not possess the same military genius as Revan, whose tactics had nearly won him 2 wars, but he was bold, confident, and still had the Starforge. Darth Bandon, another fallen Jedi, became his new apprentice. The Sith campaign became crueler, with Malak conducting numerous bombardments and ruthless massacres of entire worlds. He became focused on the capture of Bastila Shan, seeking to turn her to the dark side and gain her powers of battle meditation for the Sith cause.